lot of updates in the Nolan Wells case. First, brand new video reportedly shows what could be the last known image of him before he disappeared. That footage, obtained by TMZ, was recorded on Horn Island just hours before he vanished. We'll get into what this could mean for the investigation. And attorney Ben Crump, who is representing Nolan Wells' family, just made a major announcement that the initial preliminary findings of that independent autopsy will come out tomorrow. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so we're back with another Nolan Wells update, and this time we have more new video, and I'm very curious what role this is going to play in the investigation, because there is this video that has surfaced that could be the last known image captured of Nolan Wells before he disappeared, before his body was ultimately found. This footage was obtained by TMZ. It was reportedly recorded on Horn Island just hours before Nolan vanished. The person who captured this on film believed this was Nolan. They felt so strongly that they went to the sheriff's office and showed it to police. Now, if this is Nolan, you might be saying, well, why, right? Why did people believe that? Well, the video doesn't actually show his face. So why do people think it's him? What is this telling us about what happened then? So let me start here. Since we last talked about this case, a lot has happened. For example, it was this week when Nolan was laid to rest by his family and friends. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated the service. Tyler Perry apparently paid for the funeral. Sharpton made a huge announcement at the funeral regarding the investigation, and we're going to get more on that in a bit. But we also know the FBI is involved. They're investigating these apparent threats that were made against people connected to this case. Now, the specifics of these alleged threats, the substance, who it was sent to, but we know that the FBI is looking into this. As for the phone, Nolan's phone, the family has it, and after saying they believe data may have been deleted off that phone, it was announced that they're going to inspect that phone alongside state investigators and their own experts from the family. And this is all while the potential for a grand jury may be impaneled to hear this case. That is looming in the background. And we're still waiting on the autopsy results, right? The autopsy from the state examination and the autopsy from the independent autopsy that was ordered by Nolan Wells' family. So all of this is going on, and now I want to talk about what's happening with this video. Now, I said that the results haven't come out yet, but literally at the time of this recording, we just got word from Ben Crump. So this is the attorney representing Nolan Wells' family, that there is going to be a press conference tomorrow. And I'm going to read you exactly what it says. This is from a press release. Nationally renowned civil rights and personal injury attorney Ben Crump will join the family of Nolan Xavier Wells at a news conference Wednesday at the 117th NAACP National Convention. Crump will announce the preliminary findings of an independent autopsy conducted on behalf of the family. Wow. Okay, so the video, this announcement, let's talk about it. I want to bring on Chris McDonough. He is a homicide investigator, director of law enforcement relations, and an investigative consultant with the Cold Case Foundation. Chris, always good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. I mean, this literally broke 5 minutes before we came on air. The fact that they are going to have what they're claiming here, if this is true, the results of this independent examination, they had claimed that Nolan's body was being sent off to Washington, D.C. A, they have these results. B, that they're going to announce them, and that this is going to be before the results of the state medical examination come out. What are your thoughts?
Well, at first, Justin, thank you so much for having me on your show. And then with the family, obviously, they want to make sure that the investigation is consistent with what the state investigation would discover, the state medical examiner's office. So that would probably be one of the very first things an independent pathologist would want to say, right? Does it line up with the state medical examiner's reports that are going to be, given to the public at some point? And if in fact they don't, then of course there's going to be other interpretations of that information, and they're going to want to make sure that the state is aware of that, and then they're going to take those additional findings and push it against the investigation. I mean, that would be the logical steps here, right? And then, of course, from that point, there's going to be determination, well, what additional further testing should occur, what type of other evidence should be, looked into, and if in fact there is anomalies within the second autopsy, then of course they're going to want to, check those boxes. The state will, the state investigators, make sure that they're lining up with the findings of both autopsies as a whole.
So, right, the state medical examination is the results are not coming out because they're waiting toxicology results. To me, it would seem that this independent autopsy has not done toxicology results, right? Because they wouldn't have been able to get it back this fast. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But to make an announcement like this, does it seem to suggest to you that there could be evidence of foul play, that there were some markings or some trauma to Nolan Wells' body that would indicate this was not just a case of drowning, but something else? And I know it's complicated when you talk about drowning because, or potential drowning, because there may not be outward markings of someone pushing him into the water or holding him down or something of that nature. But to make an announcement that these findings are going to come out, is there anything we can glean from it?
Well, great points. The one thing, obviously, that can be determined almost immediately is the microscopic findings of, anything inside of the lungs as a whole. If there's water or fluid in the body or in the airway, you can also find that, in a secondary autopsy, because there will be microscopic evidence of that. So that, number one, tells us two things. A, the first thing it tells us, if there is fluid, is he was alive. Okay? Because obviously he's inhaling water at that point. So now the secondary question that can be answered there, or at least needs to be answered, is what are the circumstances, to your point, that brought him into that water? What is there evidence of, foul play? Is there evidence of alcohol, other substances in his system? And that's where the toxicology reports are going to play a pivotal role in this from the very first autopsy, because that's going to be the most concentration with inside of this young man's blood.
Okay, so we'll see what results from this. Obviously, we're going to do our best to cover it here on Sidebar. I even told my team just now, let's plan for this. Let's see what happens. Let me ask you about this footage that came out. So you have this footage obtained by TMZ, apparently recorded on Horn Island at 2:23 p.m. on July 4th. It was reportedly shown to the sheriff's office. You can seemingly see in the video the camera panning across these boats, people, all on the water. And there appears to be a man standing on the back deck of a boat. And he appears to be bending over, reaching for something. You can't see his face. But the person who shot this video believes it was Nolan. Why? The man is apparently wearing swim trunks that match the color of the swim trunks that Nolan was wearing in that July 4th photo that everybody has seen. It's a very famous photo, right? Infamous photo. Now, this is, again, the one with his friends on the boat. If this is Nolan, this video would seemingly be the last known image of him before he vanished and before his body washed up ashore just days later. When you see this video, what stands out to you when you watch it?
Well, the first thing that stands out to me is, number one, it's a proof of life. If in fact that is him, then we know that he's alive at that date and that time, based on the metadata that they can pull off of that particular video. The secondary thing that jumps out at me is you have all of these other boats around him at that point. So that means you can also get the GPS data in relationship to these other individuals around him from those other boats. So that now puts him in a particular location at a particular time. And it also tells us that if in fact he is in that is him, what's he getting on the back of that boat? So you have all kinds of information that you can glean from the fact that he may be leaning over, getting something out of the cooler, et cetera, or water, or who knows what that substance is. But now an investigator can go back and say, okay, who owned this boat? what's in that cooler, and then you can actually trace that back to maybe, other activities taking place earlier on the day, and then correlate that to potentially any other toxicology results down the line. If in fact it was a substance that, maybe alcohol or something. And we don't know that. Okay. But those are the kind of things that you can get from it. But more importantly, you can get the metadata from the GPS of all the other boats around there. And then you can correlate that to where his body was found later on, and then kind of connect those dots. How did it go from point A? How did he go from point A to point Z? And try to put that puzzle together.
Again, the video was recorded at 2:23 p.m., right? Ben Crump has said that Nolan was last seen on the island at 3 p.m. I haven't seen any contradicting account of that. It's 3 p.m. seems to be the time that we're hearing. But again, something could change. And we believe that boat left at around 4:31 p.m. So there's about this 2-hour window between this video and when the boat apparently left without him. One other thing, though, this video appears to show Nolan on a boat. Is it the same boat that his friends were on? The infamous July 4th photo shows him with his friends on a boat. This footage appears to be possibly a different boat, maybe with other people. Thoughts?
Yeah,
I don't know for sure, but I'm just thinking.
No, that's a great point, because that is obviously one of the things you would want to match up in relationship to this video. You look at the structure of the boat, you can tell the manufacturer of the boat, and all of those other situations. And then the other thing that this would show, let's say this new autopsy comes up with evidence of trauma, hypothetically, right? Are there defensive injuries, neck injuries, internal injuries? Because whenever somebody goes into the water, there are abrasions and movements or injuries that occur because of the movement of the potential, the tides in of itself. Okay. So you're also able to say, hey, wait a minute, in this particular video, we're not seeing any evidence of, quote, these kind of injuries. Okay. So that's also something to consider, pretty heavily, if in fact this is a viable piece of evidence that's presented itself now.
I also think that if people see this video coming out and think, wait a minute, this person felt it was important enough to go to the sheriff's office, good on that person to do it. Like, they see this whole wide panning shot and thinking, oh my gosh, look, they found no. It makes me wonder if other people are now going to have footage and look back and be like, oh, maybe I have something too.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, absolutely.
And I know the sheriff's office has asked that for unedited photos and videos from that day, but it just made me thought of it.
Yeah, and that's obviously going to be, again, that's going to put everything back into the column of proof of life. We know that this young man is just enjoying a July 4th celebration, and that there's nothing afoot here, right? Suspicious in nature. So it can go either way. If those dynamics changed, then what changed between that video and where his body was found? And this will lean the investigators into looking at that type of evidence pretty much harder.
And I also want to ask you something else about this, because there are other significant developments that have come out from this funeral service, other than the fact that it was just incredibly heartbreaking to hear, Nolan's family talking about him and what it's like to not have them in their life anymore. And just think about how he was an athlete. He had these NFL ambitions. He was a role model to his siblings, just an incredible young man, and how much of a tragedy this is. But this funeral service that was held on July 20th at the Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs out in Mississippi, hundreds of people showed up. Al Sharpton made a big announcement that he and the actor Tyler Perry, they each put up apparently $50,000 for information leading to a possible conviction, or, again, information about what happened to Nolan Wells. So you're looking at $100,000 total for anyone who comes forward. This is what he said at the funeral.
Since Mississippi's so special, I'm not only saying we don't want nothing. I want to say right here now, and I'm inspired by who accused us of that I want to put up from National Action Network and me I want to offer a reward of $50,000 to anybody I want to put a reward up for $50,000 for anybody that could give the information that will lead to an arrest and a conviction in the case of what happened. He was not on that island by himself. Somebody saw something and knows something. So I didn't come to make money, I came to give money. Stand up and tell the truth. Whatever it is, good or bad, we're not going to prejudge it, but we cannot end it until we know all the facts. Let me say to Christine and Elmo, before we do the prayer of committal and escort the family out, I just got a text, Christine and Elma, you know that Tyler Perry said he would pay for the funeral. He must be watching because he said, I'm going to match you and put up $50,000 more. So we putting up $100,000 for anybody that'll come forward. We just want the truth, that's all.
Chris, a $100,000 reward is pretty significant. How does that affect the investigation? Does that complicate it for investigators at all?
Unfortunately, it could be a plus or a minus in a case like this, because the type of information that you would want to come forward is probably going to be a very narrow scope in relationship to if this is foul play in any way, shape, or form. The individuals that are going to talk are probably not going to be motivated by the reward fund. However, a secondary layer of in investigations like this of individuals who are contemplating, like you said earlier, they have video, and they just didn't want to turn it in yet because they weren't sure, or et cetera. A reward may motivate those types of people to come forward and say, hey, I didn't know if this was related. I'm sorry I held this for so long, but here it is. So that in a plus, column, a reward fund could be very beneficial. But the majority of the cases that I've ever worked, reward funds, quite frankly, did not really have fruitful outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's always a plethora. There's always a potential for misinformation, false information,
Exactly.
in high-profile cases. While I have you, can I ask you about the phone, Nolan's phone? I think that's an interesting piece of potential evidence here, that Nolan didn't have his phone with him. There's been back and forth about why that was. The idea, we've heard, if he goes into the salt water, it's not abnormal for him to leave his phone like other people. But then again, if he's going off on his own to talk to potentially a young lady, why wouldn't he bring his phone with him? We know the phone reportedly was with his friends, that the family got a hold of it, finding the Life 360 app. There was an allegation that data had been deleted from the phone, and now there's going to be a mutual inspection of the phone, according to Ben Crump, both by the family's experts and the state investigators. Do you have any concern about that?
Yeah, the phone is a very interesting piece of evidence left behind by this young man. Because you can argue, to your point, that you're celebrating in the water. So of course you want to leave that device, out of a water source of any type. But then again, you have a shifting in behavior here. You have a young man who goes off, potentially it's reported with a young lady, and then just vanishes. Okay. And why would he leave his phone on the boat if in fact he's supposed to leave on that boat at some point? And now later on, it's discovered that he doesn't show up and he's reported missing, but his phone is sitting there on the boat. The investigators will be able to determine rather rapidly, not only the GPS coordinates and of course all the data footprint that they'll get out of that phone, but then when you tie that into this behavioral aspect of it, because this is the other side of this case as a whole. Whenever you get a mystery like this, specifically around water, this really turns into what's the pattern of life for this kid? How, this young man, how does he operate? Is he hanging out with all of his friends? But the answer is yes. Is he interested in girls? Thank goodness. Okay. That he's working, that part of his life. He's successful, with his high school, football, et cetera. And this is the kind of kid that just, you go, you know what? This is a very low risk victim. This is a young man, very low risk. So then you start looking at the risk factors that a suspect and or somebody who would do him harm would take. Does he get on this island with this young lady and there's somebody over there that just doesn't like him, maybe because race is playing a role here, okay? And they get into a fight and he falls into the water and he subsequently drowns. Maybe he's unconscious. And this is where the secondary autopsy will be very critical to see if there's any type of physical evidence in his body, i.e. defensive wounds, et cetera, head injuries, what we call subdural hematoma, bleeds inside of the body in of itself. And that in of itself will tell us if, in fact, there could have been an altercation of some sort. And that's the type of evidence you would want to look towards finding that would take you away from accidental to potentially something more suspicious in nature.
And according to Ben Crump during a press conference last week, the DA apparently told him that once this investigation is complete, this case could be presented to a grand jury for potential criminal charges being filed. In what capacity, we wouldn't know, right? It could be, let's say, a potential homicide charge, could be something with respect to the investigation, someone not providing accurate information to law enforcement, maybe it's tampering with evidence. What do you make of that potentiality of this case being presented to a grand jury?
Well, anything is always possible. And if in fact this, the investigation starts pointing towards, hey, the timeline, the witness statements, a lot of that information's not lining up. I had a case one time where a guy disappeared off of a boat, and we found some powder on the boat, and it was from a fire extinguisher. And we discovered later on in the investigation that the individual was telling us lies, and we were able to determine that in fact he had fired the fire extinguisher at the victim, and that there was a major altercation on this boat, and one person fell over and one person came back. And is this that type of situation? Is there a fight that took place, or even if somebody's horsing around? As kids do, as young men do nowadays, and he got hurt and they left him. They left him in the water. Well, that would be obviously information you'd want to establish. And so there's a lot of information that's still needed. The investigation, in my opinion, would still be fluid. But yes, a grand jury could come back with accessory after the fact and or other charges, manslaughter or something to that effect. We just don't know yet.
Let's see. Let's see what happens tomorrow with that independent autopsy results, the preliminary findings. Chris McDonough, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern.